Hello, 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 everyone. Hello, dear teachers from around the globe. Welcome to another session by Teach.Love.Earn with wonderful teachers from around the globe. And today, as you can see, my guest is Mr. André Hedlund from Brazil. Welcome, André.
Well, thank you very much, Olga. It's such a wonderful pleasure to be here, really, especially because I know we're going to have a wonderful conversation. So I'm very excited.
Me too. I was so much looking forward to this session. Just let me please introduce yourself, Andrea. Dear colleagues, as you may probably have seen in the description down below, that Andrea is doing so much work dedicated to letting us know about the neuroscience, how it works, how we can implement it into our classrooms to help our students, to help ourselves, first of all, because there is so much knowledge that we may have heard of, or we may lack, or we can just get to understand it better in order just to skyrocket during our classrooms. Please have a look. So Andrea is a teacher trainer. He's been a teacher for several years. He has many, many publications. He is a consultant. He is freelance teacher, teacher trainer. He works as an English teacher to gifted Italians. Wow, so much credit to you. Trainer at Edu Gallery, Pilgrims and Amalingua. And he's been in English schools, at universities, education centers, and he's a presenter at all the ELT, EFL conferences. So very, very famous, actually, personality around the teachers. If you haven't seen his lectures or his conferences, you can find some on his YouTube. He has many, many live streams uploaded there. And I'm just I want to tell you so much gratitude for your website, because when I visited your website, it gave me such a brilliant, fantastic wide picture about your personality, about the all the job that you are doing. Andrea, is just a fantastic job actually that you are doing, and huge applauses to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, after this introduction, I think I'm going to cry. I mean, I've been doing a lot of things. I know I've been involved in different projects, but I don't think I'm that popular yet. Maybe, I've been attending different conferences for at least, I'd say, 5 years now. But I still have a lot to cover, a lot of ground to cover. And this is why I am working really hard to make things available, things that are useful, things that teachers can implement right away, and especially to help them reflect and rethink their teaching practices. This is what really drives me nowadays. How can I make my contribution? So thank you so much for this wonderful description of my career. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. No, but you see, all the time we are all starting. So actually, this is my mission during these interviews, to exchange all the knowledge and just extend our horizons in the way that we can always have something to learn about and something to share. And
Yes.
I want to say here right now, huge congratulations to you, Andrea, on your recent publication about the learning cosmos. And
Yes. Wow.
yes, the publication that you showed me before this interview, and you recently shared it on your Instagram. So if you could just speak a little bit about this, and then we will dive into more questions, just to give
Definitely.
an idea.
Well, yes, with pleasure. I do have the magazine right here with me. So for those of you, I'm sure you cannot get in Europe the physical version of the magazine. But if you follow me, if you follow Olga and anybody who's ever talked to me, I'm sure you can find the link to New Routes magazine. And it's really something that I'm proud of, because it's the result of a lot of thinking, lots of work that came from my master's, especially at the University of Bristol. So I was really trying to understand how we learn. So how is it that the brain and the mind learn? and what are the theories and principles that educators should know about, coming from cognitive psychology, cognitive neuroscience, social and developmental psychology as well. And I felt like we normally talk about some of those principles and theories, but we never really talk about all of them together. We normally, if you have a training session maybe at your school, maybe you've heard of, I don't know, cognitive load theory. So how much you can hold in terms of memory, short-term memory, working memory. Maybe you've heard of that. Maybe you've heard of how you can engage your students. Maybe you've heard of how you can get them motivated and all of that, but they're always worked separately, I think. And so my mission was really to look at this incredible universe surrounding our learners, but based on the evidence that we have available from those sciences, brain sciences, and then try to put them together in one place. And that's what I call the learning cosmos, right? And the learning cosmos is really nothing new, I'd say. It's just really putting all of the old stuff together, let's say. So here, for those of you who are interested, you can see that all of the principles and theories about learning that I consider incredibly relevant and important are here somehow. And they are actually, there are different spheres or different levels that you can see. For example, you have the cognitive level. That is the level that we normally talk more about: attention, memory, for example, engagement. And then you have the emotional level. And that's the level that we've been talking more often for a couple of years now, but not enough, I think. It's like emotional intelligence, how you can regulate your emotions, so self-regulation, how emotions are constructed in the brain, right? And then you have other spheres, such as the motivational sphere, the attitudes and belief sphere, and then you have the contextual, environmental sphere that depends on your school. And this is really what I wanted to do. I wanted to make it easy, but not too oversimplified. I just wanted it to be something that teachers can go to, and then they can find all of those theories and principles organized according to the levels of how we observe the universe. So that's the analogy, the narrative there. And to maybe encourage them to learn more about each sphere. So if you don't know so much about emotional intelligence, and it's part of this design, so then you can learn more about emotional intelligence. Maybe you don't know so much about intrinsic motivation, autonomy, mastery, for example, purpose and things like that. It's part of the design. So you can actually dig more. You can do your own research. And this is really why I think it's a great tool. I hope it is, that's my my expectation anyway, because then it helps you go after the information you're looking for, what you need to know more about the different levels of how your students learn. And that's really, I'm very proud to present it to the world, and I hope everybody can read it. I hope I can get a lot of feedback so I can always make it better. That's the idea.
Bravo to you, André. And I remember I read on your website this story you shared, how you received this package, all the feelings that you were going through, how you were unpacking this. And there is a very interesting, actually, introduction to how you came up with this idea that I encourage everyone to visit the website and just read this post, because this is so inspiring. This is also one more, apart from the actual message that is delivered in the article, this is one more way how we can, we all teachers can get inspired, because we all have some particular thoughts, but sometimes we think that this is nothing new, or this is maybe I will not be able to express it or something. No, you can do everything. Just look at that. Exactly as you said, André, you took all of the components which are kind of known, right? As you said, nothing new develop not a bicycle, but you organize it in absolutely unique and fantastic way. And this is
I'm so glad to know.
all of the illustrations is just genius. It's brilliant how you put everything together. How much time it took you? I saw
Yes.
some pictures that you were drawing it on the blackboard, a
I
physical
was
blackboard.
actually the wall here. There's a bedroom here, and I decided to. At first, I wanted it to be a workplace, some place that I could actually, draw and write things down. And then I remember getting some wallpaper that actually works as a blackboard. And then, so you put the wallpaper, you get some chalk, and then you can draw on it.
Okay.
So that's what we did here. And yeah, so because I remember the first idea came to me when I was doing my master's back in 2018 at the University of Bristol. I wanted to look at classroom strategies or practices that are based on the science of learning, on the mind-brain education science, because then that means that they should work more effectively because they have been tested, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are aligned with how the brain and the mind work. And then I wanted to make basically a compilation, let's say, of all of those techniques and strategies in one place. And that was my dissertation. So I had that idea. I had a lot of practices and classroom strategies based on those sciences. And then when I came back to Brazil, then I was offered to write the cover article for this magazine here by the editor, Jack Scholes. And I had written something before. And then he asked me, because he really liked the one that I had written before, if I wanted to write the cover for not the next issue, but 2 issues that in the future, right? In the next year, I think. So I said, well, of course, I would be honored. And then maybe I can expand on what I had been doing with my dissertation. And I got inspired by Stephen Hawking and Carl Sagan. I'm a geek, I told you. I really like to learn about space exploration, other worlds, other galaxies, and things like that. And I was reading Stephen Hawking's book, A Brief History of Time. And then he somehow inspired me to use analogies, because that's what he does. Analogies are a powerful tool for teaching. And then I decided that, okay, if I had to use an analogy, what would it be? And for some reason, I was watching Cosmos on TV, and I said, well, why not use this space analogy, this Cosmos analogy? Because if you look, there are many different worlds and many different universes. If you think about, we can look at the planetary level, our planet, or we can look at the solar system level, or the galactic level, the interstellar level. And that's how it happened, basically. And then I was drawing I was trying to find how to fit all of those things. It took me a long time, actually. I don't know, maybe, to be honest, once I got the idea, it took me probably a month or something like that. But to get to that stage, all of the process probably took me almost 3 years. And then when I found the analogy, because it was really the process of finishing my dissertation and everything. But when the analogy came, I said, oh, now I can make this work. And then it took me only a month or so to put all of those pieces together. And then I was really glad with the result when I got the magazine. First, when I got the PDF in my email box, I said, oh my God, this is it. This is, they were able to create what was inside my brain. That's it. And then when I got the magazine, the physical magazine, I remember that I couldn't wait to get to my apartment. I just, I unpacked it right there downstairs in the building. And I looked at it. I said, wow, it looks even more beautiful like this, right? I was really proud. I was really, wow. It's something that I had no idea was going to give me such joy, such joy to share with the world. Yeah.
Absolutely, Andrea, I'm listening. I just wanted to make a screen bigger when you were showing this picture, but I was not able to. And right now I found it on your website. So what I want to do is if I can.
Sure. Yes.
share the screen. Okay, so that our viewers could just
There you go. Yes.
see the picture better. Just a second, you guys see?
Yes.
Okay, this is the one. Look how beautiful.
Wonderful. Yes.
This is just genius, you know, and how much helpful it is that in case I feel that I lack some kind of knowledge in some particular aspect, I can easily just look at this picture, see each and every component, and I really have all of this solar system together in front of me, and I can just improve all of the pieces step by step in my knowledge, in my own library. Just go and check what it is. Look at
That's
this.
the idea, Olga. So,
Fantastic.
I can tell right now, my suggestion to all of you who want to start using the Learning Cosmos conceptual framework, start from the inner circles, Look at, because I mentioned all of those components, as Olga said, they came from research. They came from, I have lots and lots of authors who have studied those things and proposed how they work and how we can use them in the classroom. So my tip is start from the cognitive level. Learn about attention, engagement, consolidation, build, and feedback from my professor, Paul Howard-Jones. He was one of the authors I used. And a French professor, Stanislas Dehaene. And really, if you read their books and their papers, and you will see what I'm talking about. So how does attention work? And how can we help our students pay attention? How can we engage them? How does memory consolidate in the brain? And then once you are confident with that cognitive level, then you move, outward. So you go to the emotional level, learn about those theories. So you will expand your internal library, let's say, your repertoire. And then after a couple of weeks studying this, it should become more natural. You should be able to look at your student and see, well, apparently they can pay attention. Their cognitive level is working well based on the evidence that I can collect from what they are doing, but they're not performing well enough. There's something wrong there. Is it motivation? Is it their attitude toward learning? Is it their emotional level? So then you can start looking for clues, to try to understand why learning is not taking place more effectively. So that's really the idea behind the Learning Cosmos framework.
Fantastic. And is it exactly here that we can, I believe this is here, download this PDF, right? Okay.
Definitely.
I love this picture. I love it. Oh my God.
I was really happy.
Yeah, exactly. André, congratulations, and I wish you more and more inspiration and more achievements.
Thank you very much.
And I would like more teachers, of course, to be to get familiar with this, with the framework, with the idea. And I wish you the growth in this sense that you can, as on your website you said that your mission is to spread a word and just build this community where teachers they have all of these complete knowledge, not just some pieces, because I'm not sure like in any other countries, but in my country I wish we were taught better the methodology, all of these important pieces of the actual puzzle, because we were more taught like a theory but not connected to any practice, and everything what I was able to get during the practice, it was after the graduation, and now we need to come back, like kind of start from the beginning. So
that's it. I mean, we are taught how to deal with content, right? How do you present content? How do you make your students practice content? And as English teachers, we are also taught how to deal with certain skills. And those skills are listening, speaking, reading, and writing, basically. So we teach content and we teach skills. But we don't teach content and skills. We actually teach human beings, and they have cognition, emotions, levels of motivation. And if we don't understand at least some basic principles of how those things work, it doesn't matter really how much you know about teaching content and listening, reading, writing, and speaking, because your student, the center, the heart of your practice, your student is not getting any of that because there's something wrong with their, I don't know, emotional level. And then you have to know what is available, what's out there for you to try to solve that so that they can learn more effectively. So after all, if you think about it, we've been taught, I'd say, the wrong way for a very long time. Those things, they should have been taught. They should have been part of our teacher development programs, pre-service and in-service. How do you deal with emotional intelligence? How do you make sure that your students are in the right emotional state to learn? Because if they're not learning. Then you're wasting their time, you're wasting your time. So I know it's hard because you have too many students all at once working with you. But if you don't understand those things, then it doesn't work, right? You have to understand those things.
Absolutely. And not only that we are wasting time, but actually students get sad because they feel that they're not learning, and we feel a bit lost, kind of. I think I'm doing everything right, but what's wrong?
Yes.
So, having said that, can we, Andrea, cover these neuroscience strategies in the education science and education system? I know that you have so much here to say. Where we should start from, what we should know, what are the first things that we need to be aware of?
Excellent question. I think this is really something of a mission to us nowadays. I'm part of a SIG, a special interest group here in Brazil for Brastiço, and Brastiço is the largest teaching English to speakers of other languages community here. And we have a conference coming next week. It's going to be great. And really what we want is to propagate evidence-based strategies for teachers to use in their lessons, coming from a specific area that we call mind, brain, and education, MBE. So I think anybody who wants to know more about this area, they should start by looking for MBE authors, MBE books. So Tracy Tokuhama Espinosa, and they can find many references to her work on my website, edcrocks.com. So she's wonderful. She has published many books about how the mind, brain, education science works. My professor, Paul Howard-Jones at the University of Bristol, who's a big reference in educational neuroscience, which is a related area, right? So when we think about mind, brain, and education, we are really thinking about psychology, neuroscience, and education, pedagogy, andragogy, and things like that. But if you think about educational neuroscience, then you're really focusing on the neuroscience applied in educational settings. You also have psychological or educational psychology, actually, or psychology of education. That was what I studied, also related. But you also have something bigger nowadays that people have been using. It's called the science of learning. So the science of learning is this umbrella term that really looks at all of the contributions about how people learn, from a behavioral aspect, from a cognitive aspect, from an emotional aspect. So brain sciences, neuroscience included, right? And I think really, if you start looking for authors propagating those ideas, as a teacher, I'm sure you're going to benefit a lot because you will understand the complexity of learning. Learning is a very complex phenomenon, really. If you think about what it takes for people to actually learn something and be able to remember for the rest of their lives, there are many things at play. You have at the molecular level, how your neurons are connecting and making new synapses, for example, and how you strengthen those neural networks, because learning is really a network inside your brain. I actually have a brain here. So, so this is my brain. Well, half a brain, right? Mm-hmm. But, when you learn, you use your senses to pick up stimuli from the environment normally. So maybe visual input or phonological input or anything. It could be a feeling that you have when you touch something, and your brain will process that information through certain channels, let's say. So it's going first into your sensory memory that lasts a couple of seconds, and then it's transferred to your short-term memory that has to do with your working memory. It's also very limited. It probably holds information for a couple of minutes, and then you have to rehearse and repeat that and retrieve that for a certain period of time for you to actually consolidate all over your brain as a neural network. So it's going to be all over your cortex, right? It's a beautiful process, really, that depends on many variables. So, for example, how full was your working memory when you received the information? Was it too full because maybe you were distracted? Maybe you were in an emotional state that was not conducive to learning? How many times did you actually repeat those things? How many times did you rehearse? Did you have any emotion attached to that learning in particular that was really strong, that will actually help you remember that or not? So all of those things matter, and we have to learn about them. So start learning about mind-brain education, MBE, and SOL, Science of Learning. And then and again, go to my website. I have a lot of references there. And I think that maybe you can even start a study group with your teachers. How about that, huh? If you are working at a school, get together once a week, read a paper, read a book, read something, and talk about those things. Read my blog, read other people's blogs. They have lots of useful information for you to understand how the brain learns, and especially to understand what doesn't work very effectively and you're still using in the classroom, right?
Yes, actually, Andrea, it helps me a lot to kind of understand. Overall, I understand what you're talking about, obviously, but I have a little bit of, I can imagine, because what helped me that I've read this book, Emotional Intelligence. Many people told me about this, and then I finally decided that I have to read it. And yeah, there are so many. They're explaining all of these connections between the emotion, what is going on actually inside our head, inside our brain. This is so interesting to read. And of course, when you're reading, you kind of start imagining and putting this image on the kind of what it looks in the classroom. So it really helps. Thank you so much for sharing this. And also I wanted to mention in this sentence that when you, dear colleagues, go to Andre's website, there would be the offer that you can provide your email, and you will have a file on just a sec, I will tell you. This is a brain-friendly classroom strategies.
Exactly.
And this is just a fantastic, this small file, but it has like very direct 4 strategies that you can at least these ones get familiar with and already kind of have these parallels, what you're doing, what you are using. Maybe you will have some additional insights. And as you mentioned, Andrea, about this kind of drilling, the information, the new knowledge, I saw your video on your YouTube channel, and you were talking about the neuromyth. And I must tell you that all of them was like shocking to me, because we've been told all the time that we kind of use 10% of our brain and drillings and everything. And what really caught my attention about the actually repeating, the words, drilling, all of this, because this is kind of the strategy to learn the language. Can you please explain it a little bit again in detail? So is it a good idea or not? How should we actually do?
Wonderful. That depends. That's the thing about neuroscience and psychology. It depends on many variables and the context, really. So one of the things we do, and this is really the legacy of communicative language teaching approach, right? And task-based, and the PPP framework, presentation, practice, and production, is that we have to drill the new chunk a certain amount of times, let's say, so that our students can internalize and become more familiar with that. The problem is it normally does not happen in the same lesson, you know? And there's a very straightforward explanation for that. We need to sleep to consolidate memory. And if you look at, and this is really about especially conceptual memory. So vocabulary, for example, you know, just to give you an example, if you're teaching your students new vocabulary about cars, let's say, you know, and then they will not learn all of those things in that lesson. I can tell you that. They need to revisit those things with a certain frequency so that their brains can strengthen the network, the neural network that contains those words, right? And connect the neural network to the pre-existing neural network that they already have in their native language, right? Their mother tongue is already there. So they already know those words. They just have to connect a new conceptual vocabulary to their pre-existing network, right? This takes time, and it's very hard for me to tell you how long it takes. It depends on the student. It depends on their level of engagement, motivation, etc., etc. But we know that what we do in the class might be misguided because we tend to believe that we have to repeat things as much as possible in that one lesson so that we can give our students a chance to memorize those things. Actually, according to the research, it would be better to space out the number of repetitions over a longer period of time because you are sleeping in between and you are retrieving or you're trying to recuperate those words, for example. And this effort that you make to bring those things back to your working memory actually strengthens the neural network. It's a biological process known as long-term potentiation. So when you have two neurons firing together, they wire together. So when they are firing together for a longer time, they become best buddies. You know, they can communicate very easily because they've done that so many times. It doesn't happen on the same day or overnight, you know, it takes time to happen. So one of the things that we should do more often, and this is really something that could be potentially incredibly effective actually, is that we should recycle certain things of each lesson at different moments throughout the entire semester, you know, because then we would make sure we are going back, we're revisiting those things for a much longer period of time, because normally, depending on how advanced you are, when you study one lesson and you were exposed to those words, the new vocabulary, you never really use those things again, you know, it ends there. It's a one lesson thing, right? And then you move on, the next lesson has new information, you move on, and then you're really going to use those things again when you do a test, maybe. So you haven't been retrieving those things along the way. You haven't been spacing those things. So you can use flashcards. Quizlet is a great tool to do that. So you can work with the idea of spaced repetition. So you've been exposed to something. Try to retrieve that. Try to remember that tomorrow, and then a couple of days after, maybe a week or two after, at the end of the month, you know. So you keep spacing out, and this will probably give you better results. You will be able to remember those things for longer, and that means you will probably learn those things for the rest of your lives, you know. And we don't know those things because we don't really study how the brain consolidates memory. So we think that we have to drill to kill. That's the idea, right? You drill as much as possible. But I think nowadays we understand that students can do it at home more than in the classroom because they have much more time at home. And it doesn't have to be a 1 hour session of drilling and retrieving things. It's actually a couple of minutes over a longer period works much better than a full hour on one day, right? So we have to learn those things. Those are very important strategies that we can use, and we're not using them very effectively, I think.
Yeah, I like the idea that you said just right now. It helps to remember even the whole idea that smaller portions, but more often.
Yes.
Yeah, so kind
That's
of smaller. Smaller parts, smaller pieces, but more often. That's for sure. And Andrea, because I mentioned it, let's just also cover this one. Do we use 10% of our brains, or do we not?
Well,
Because I think this is the most questioned.
yeah, this is actually funny, and honestly, I don't know where it came from. I think I had a lesson about that at the University of Bristol, that they were trying to measure brain activity, and then they had a number that was like 10%. I don't remember where or how long ago, but that doesn't make any sense really. And again, let me show you my brain. And that right now that you took a sip of water, so I can tell Olga's brain was basically, first you had to look at the glass of water right there
I
in
did.
front of you.
I did.
So you activated your occipital lobe, that's the back of your brain, and you have the visual cortex here that is responsible for processing images, right? So you had to do that. And then you had to move your hand to reach the glass of water. So you had to actually use movement. And then you have a primary motor cortex that is actually here in your the frontal areas of your brain, the frontal lobe, and you have a motor cortex responsible for movement as well. But you also have to coordinate those movements with your cerebellum. That's the little brain you have here. And then when you touch the glass of water, you have your somatosensory cortex. That's actually the parietal lobe. So that's the center of the brain, activated because you feel the texture and the temperature of the object you're touching, for example, right? And while you are doing that, you also have to activate the muscles of your face and mouth to open your mouth, and you have to synchronize that. So all of those things are happening at once in your brain. Multiple areas of your brain are being activated all of the time, and you're still listening to me explaining all of those things. So if you think about your temporal lobe, for example, especially the left temporal lobe, you have the Wernicke's area that is responsible for speech comprehension, for example. You have your auditory cortex, processing those sounds coming into your ear. All of those things are taking place right now, and your working memory, because you have to, so the frontal lobe, your working memory, your attentional network, all of those things, the brain is highly interconnected. There is no way you could be using only 10% of your brain. It doesn't make any sense, really. We are using lots and lots of our brain all of the time, because every little thing we do requires so many different regions to be activated, right? So that's how incredible the brain is. So it's a big, big myth. Don't believe that. We use a lot more than 10% of our brains. Yes.
Thank you for saying this. I think that all of the people, they are doing the best they can. Actually, don't think of yourself small. Don't think that you do less than someone else, and never compare yourself to anyone else, but only compare yourself to yourself yesterday.
Exactly.
That's the thing. Thank you
That's
so
the
much,
idea of a
Andrea.
growth mindset, right? I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I on the go, on the spot, I wanted to ask you also: is there the idea, the explanation when it is better for children, for example, to start learning a language? Is it true that kind of an adult has real troubles and has less potential or something? Could you please cover this?
Well, actually, I've been talking about this to my postgraduate students, and anytime somebody asks you what's the best age to learn an additional language, you should answer, what's your age now? And then that's the best time.
Okay.
You can learn a language at any age. We have an iconic case of Mary Hobson. She's a British citizen. I don't know if she's alive. She must be almost 100 years old. And she started learning Russian when she was 54 years old. And she got her PhD in Russian literature, and she became an official translator of some Russian poets like Alexander Pushkin or something.
Yeah.
And then she is actually recognized by the Russian government as the biggest authority in Alexander Pushkin's poems. She learned when she was 54 years old. I mean, this is an extreme case, definitely. She was really passionate about Russian literature. She had the time, the resources, the motivation, all of those things were aligned. But we do know that kids, they have many benefits because they are in a period that has to do with creating new synapses in the brain, right? It's an exuberant period of new connections. So, but at the same time, they don't have a lot of prior knowledge because they are creating new experiences as they grow. So adults, they have a lot of prior knowledge, but they don't have a very, well, I'd say plastic brain. Their brains are still plastic, can still make a lot of connections and everything, but not as much as kids, of course, right? And the thing is, if you start learning an additional language as a kid, the benefits you get from the bilingual experience will transfer to other areas of your life. So if you think about it, you can pay more attention, you can memorize better, you can inhibit certain behaviors better because you're bilingual. You can socialize better, apparently, empathize. You can look at things from different perspectives because languages, they really give you different angles, different perspectives of, looking at the world, at the universe. So I'd say there isn't a best age for you to start studying any language. But the sooner you start, the earlier you start, the more likely you are to finish, because adults, they start and stop all the time. Kids, they don't have that option normally. So the more likely you are to actually go all the way till the end of the course, the more likely you are to use the benefits that you get right there from this experience and apply them in different contexts at school, for example, or socializing with other kids. And those things, they will bring benefits, right? They will, for example, they will give you access to more opportunities as well. So I'd say there isn't really an age. And my tip is, if you have kids, if you are parents and you have kids, and somebody speaks another language in the household, have them, so raise those kids bilingual. That's the best gift you can give them. They are going to be wonderfully creative. They're going to be more tolerant. They're going to have different perspectives of life and the world. They're going to have better attention, improved cognition, all of those things just by learning another language as they are growing up. So do that. So if you are Portuguese, living in Portugal, and your wife is French, so you talk to the kid in Portuguese, your wife talks to the kid in French, and then the kid will learn English at school. That's wonderful, wonderful gift. I think we should all have the opportunity to grow up like that, right?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And actually, the more languages you speak, the kind of, I would say, I don't know, more freedom you have. You feel free because, it's fantastic feeling.
Definitely.
Andrea, also I recalled one myth. I don't know if it is a myth. I remember I was told once that those people who kind of, let's say, who speak European languages, this Romanian family, right?
Yeah.
Or the Slavic languages, and if they study kind of Asian, these Chinese, Japanese, their brain kind of has like second life or something, becomes more creative and works better or something. First of all, is it true or not? And if it is, does it work the other way around?
Well, I don't think it really matters which language you are studying and how different it is from your own language. Being bilingual normally does make you more creative because creativity has to do with being able to look at things from different angles, right? And there is, we know from lots of research in cognitive psychology and applied linguistics, for example, that your language, the language that you have, or the languages that you have, influence the way you think about things, right? If you have different labels, let's say, different words to think about the same concept. So maybe you speak Russian and then Chinese, Mandarin, and Portuguese, my language, or Spanish, and you have different ways of referring to certain things, to certain concepts, it's really, you have a toolbox, right? You have this incredible repertoire that you can use to be more creative, that you can actually understand. This is something that monolinguals cannot do very well. We call it a metalinguistic knowledge, right? So monolinguals, if they only know one language, they don't necessarily know that other languages, they have different constructions for sentences, right? Because we learned that, I mean, in English, and I speak German as well. And then when you have a verb in German, if you have an auxiliary verb and a main verb, the main verb comes at the end of the sentence. And this is really, it took me a very long time to get used to that, right? It's weird for me because normally verbs stay together in English and in Portuguese, for example. But then that changes my perspective. I had never thought, think about it, I had no idea that this even existed before I started learning German. And this is the feeling that monolinguals have about every other language. They have no idea that certain constructions are possible in different languages. And so they are very restricted, really, or limited to thinking in a very specific way, conditioned by their language. But that doesn't mean that they cannot think in different ways, of course. Your language will not determine the things you can think of, but it will definitely shape and influence the things you can think of. So you can be creative by learning a second language, most definitely, because it will open up so many new possibilities of thinking about and understanding the world, right? Which is really the source of creativity, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you,
Yes.
Andra. And I see right now that I have one more question about if a little bit to come back to evidence-based practices about the neuroscience strategies. How can we connect those sciences, the science of learning with the teaching? Because it's different if you're a tutor, if you have a little bit of freedom, and if you work at school, or even if it is a private school, and so on and so forth. So there are these nuances, right? So what can you say on this matter? How to better implement?
That's a great question, Olga. I think there are many limitations, really. So going back to the learning cosmos idea, if you think about the environmental level that I call the interstellar sphere, is really the context and the resources that you have. So if you are a private tutor, you have one student, a private student, and you have first lots of say whether you're going to use this material or that material, if you're not going to use any book at all, if you're going to to actually put together a syllabus from nowhere, the curriculum and all of that. But then there are teachers working in a context where things are very much top down. So the school decides the book, the syllabus, how much of the book you have to actually cover, how much freedom you have to be able to choose from other resources, for example. So, and then of course, they're completely different scenarios, right? I think one thing you can do is you can use the science of learning to either give you ideas, very specific ideas of activities, or how you can use those activities based on how our brain works, right? So like I said, spacing, spaced repetition, retrieval practice, interleaving, those are things that you can use regardless of where you are working, basically. If it's top down from the school, or if it's as a private tutor, right? It doesn't matter where you are. The other thing that the science of learning can do for you is really to help you rethink the entire teaching learning process. And then as a private tutor, I think you have a lot of say there. So if you learn more and more about the science of learning, and you learn that certain things don't make sense anymore, many things are based on neuromyths, then you can really chuck everything, and then restart and do things differently, I think. But my suggestion is that you start little by little. Start with the activities, start with strategies that can work more effectively to get your students to learn those contents that you are teaching. And then really, as you are becoming more and more confident, then you can really rethink the entire practice, I think. So for example, nowadays, I'd say that if you're working at a big school, big institution, and you don't have a lot of freedom, you can at least organize the book activities and digital activities in a way that is spaced throughout a longer period of time, for example, right? And you can also have a lot of moments in every lesson for retrieving. So when your students come, you say, okay, let's try to remember what we did last class, right? And then that effort to remember, the retrieval practice, actually helps strengthen the neural connections in the brain. So you can use like that. Learn some of those activities, learn some of those strategies, get confident, and then as you move up the ladder, then you try to do something more systematic, more institutional, let's say, And as a private tutor, you have a lot of say. You can do whatever you want, really.
Yeah,
Yes.
true. Yeah, I really like how you put it, Andrea, that even if we are tied with all of these limitations, in case we get just this knowledge, the understanding, the overall picture, I think even, I just think, and you will tell me if I'm right, unconsciously you will start even doing the same book, the same page or something, you will start doing it absolutely differently. Yeah.
Yeah, what the brain does, and you've said it, the brain makes things more automatic,
Mm-hmm.
So if you do the same thing over and over again, it becomes a habit. This is how we create habits. And the reason why we create habits is that we can still free up our working memory to learn new things and to pay attention while we do things more on autopilot, And this happens to all teachers who are just basically blindly following a framework that, it starts like this. So when you plan your lesson, you're always going to do the exact same thing, right? Because it's autopilot. You've done it many years. And then that's what you have to do. You have to use the science of learning and the evidence coming from the science to help you reframe those things and rethink those things, I think. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andrea. And actually, it's very supportive. I like how you put it into your answer that it's not like it's not possible or something. It's very, very supportive answer. Thank you for this.
I'm glad to know.
Yeah, Andrea, we have a few more questions, and I'm not sure
Sure.
which one to pick up.
Well,
tell me, what about education system in your country? If you could give an idea, it's very, very interesting.
Yes.
All the ups and downs. Something what you're super, super proud of, or something what you think can be improved, or what we can know about.
Definitely. Well, I can tell you right now that Brazil is not figuring among the best educational systems around the world. Unfortunately, we have PISA, right, that assesses, that measures how 15, 16, 17-year-old, I think 15-year-old kids are doing around the world. And Brazil is always really at the bottom, I'm afraid, because of, I think one of the things that really gets in the way here in Brazil is that we are very much content driven. It's really about memorization. It's not so much about learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so that permeates the entire educational system, because there is a moment in those kids' lives that they have to choose their career, and they have to do, the entry exam for university. Now we have a national exam for that to test your high school knowledge, basically. And then you can use the score to apply to different universities, right? But then again, it's a multiple choice test. And that means that you really have either to memorize lots of things, or you just have to eliminate things, exclusion criteria, basically. Of course, it does require some critical thinking, but very little, I think. And that means that we have very much, I'd say, for the last, I don't know, decades, abolished the idea of working with projects, right? We don't do lots of projects anymore. So if you go to any typical high school here in Brazil, they have mock tests every weekend or every month at least, to memorize as much as they can and to really practice the skill of bearing, let's say, to being able to take a mock test. So this is what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have another problem in Brazil. We have private and public schools. Private schools are normally better because they receive a tuition from parents, from families. Public schools in Brazil, some of them are excellent, very prestigious schools, but just a minority, I'm afraid. And in some places, Brazil is such a big country. In some places, sometimes there isn't a school for the community. So kids, they have to walk many kilometers to get to a school. They have no technology, no electricity. Sometimes they don't even have a building, right, for the school. So it's a I'd say very diverse scenario, a multifaceted problem here in Brazil with education. And our universities, so building up, they really focus on theoretical things. So it's not really about practical knowledge that you can. I'll give you an example that directly affects the work that I do. If you study modern languages, it's our TESOL qualification here in Brazil. So if you go undergrad course, modern languages, if you're going to work with little kids, you have to do pedagogy, for example. You don't really have lots of practical experience teaching, really. You learn about Vygotsky and you learn about Piaget, for example, and all of Maria Montessori, Loris Malaguzzi. You learn about all of those famous authors and their pedagogies and everything. But you don't really learn in a practical way by doing how to teach them, right? So what happens when you come out of this, what would be the pre-service qualification before you start working, you don't really have lots of experience teaching. You do have lots of theoretical knowledge, but that cannot really be converted or easily transferred into teaching practice. And this is so that's why whenever I go to deliver workshops, I really focus on the practical elements that can help teach. So how do you do this with kids? I mean, okay, Piaget talks about the cognitive development stages, right? Excellent. So kids who are 2 years old, do they have fine motor skills, for example? Yeah, but what does that mean in the classroom? What are the activities that you can use them based on those things, right? And that's the problem, I feel. So I feel like we have a lot to improve here in Brazil, but we do have some interesting initiatives, and I hope that any improvement will go through rethinking what we've been doing for maybe a century, really, and changing things and realizing that education is not just about memorizing facts that you can Google in 2 seconds. That's over. You do have to learn how to implement skills and competencies in your daily lives so that you can be a functional human being. And now we have legislation. We have the Common Core that was voted and it was elaborated a couple of years ago. And now schools are adopting. They have to adopt the Common Core. And we talk about 10 general competencies that need to be developed in the classroom, like digital culture, collaboration, for example, critical thinking, and all of those things. They have to be part of the curriculum. So hopefully things will be better in the next couple of years, but still we have a long way to go. Yes.
Andrea, first of all, thank you for saying this. And, I think this is really important to share all of the kind of imperfections, maybe, because I think that Brazil is not the only country with such kind of difficulties, yeah.
Yes.
And maybe our colleagues who are watching us right now till this moment, actually, thank you so much for staying till this moment. And they
My
also feel
pleasure.
supported, and kind of we are not alone, yeah, we are all together. And I wish your mission to be accomplished, yeah. I wish you to be heard. I wish you the popularity with all of your work done, because you're doing tremendous job, and it will be much help for all the teachers. So I wish all the best luck in everything what you are doing, and this will bring not only the Brazil but all the other countries as well much higher, and finally teachers will be on the proper level where they're supposed to be, because they're doing an important job. And of
Yes.
course, we're trying our best to help our students. So I wish everyone just believe in yourself, in what you're doing, and in this way we will change these systems and they will become better. And Andrea, on this note, if possible, could I please ask you to share some final supporting word to teachers during this period? I mean, all the period
Yeah.
during this pandemic, during this new normality, normals, and everything. And during here
Yes.
in Europe, this is kind of vacation period, but I know that a lot of teachers continue working either on their projects or tutoring. So just, sweet words of support.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much for your kind words. I really hope that my work gets to, I don't know, inspire people, and then maybe make them rethink the things that they're doing. And I think my final message really is that take a break, be human, work work on your mental health. Really, this is something that we don't talk enough, I think. We have to stress that the brain takes time to learn. So what's the point, really trying to rush with the syllabus and covering everything? It's not going to stick anyway. So try to be more humane with your students and really listen to them and share and understand that they are emotional beings and social beings, and that sometimes they're not ready, they are not in the right mind or emotional state, they don't have the right levels of motivation, and that's okay because we're all human, right? We have a wonderful educator who has changed the world, and I'm inspired by this man. He passed away a couple of decades ago, and his name is Paulo Freire. And Paulo Freire, he is what we consider, I think we call him the father of critical pedagogy, right? And he says something that I think could be my final message. He says that education doesn't change the world. Education changes people, and people change the world, right? And I think it's really about educating yourselves, understanding how we can learn better, how we can teach better, so that we don't just do things for doing things, for the sake of doing things, because we've been doing the same things for over and over in decades. And just try to think, try to analyze, try to look at the evidence that we have. That's why the scientific community exists, to help out, to test things, and then give them to you so that you can think about them and use them. And if you do that, maybe little by little, by changing people in your classroom, your students, they will be able to change the world as well as you will be able to change the world, right? So that's my final message. Learn how to learn and learn how to teach, and the world will be much better.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much. These are very kind words and really inspiring and supportive. And actually, I want to mention that on Andrea's YouTube channel, and you can find it in the description down below, there is another session Andrea delivered about the mental health, and I enjoyed it so much, because this is not
Good.
well, I don't want to say kind of like not typical, but very different from others which I I've listened to, because André is sharing such nice moments from his life. I really encourage you guys to check out this video. This is the session about the mental health. You will easily find it. And also we can have another session with Andrea, and probably we were thinking about the mental health and other topics. So we hope to see you in our next videos. Please stay tuned. Everything will be announced here on YouTube and on our Instagrams. So we invite you to follow us if you don't. And also please consider subscribing to our YouTube channels, to this YouTube channel, and check out all other videos that we have on our channels, because a lot of them have much useful information, and hopefully anyone can find something what is needed for them. Also, please share this video with anyone for whom it will be useful and helpful. Andrea, thank you so much for all your time, for all your knowledge that you shared today. Total pleasure and absolutely grateful to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. It was wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Olga, for inviting me, for having me here. And you know where to find me. Just keep, tuned, because there will be more and more useful resources coming at you.
Yes. So we are finishing this session and hope to see you in our next videos. Thank you for staying until this moment. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Just a second.